My two oldest thought the meeting with my attorney was just a formality. They thought I'd called everyone together, because I was too tired to keep making decisions. They walked into Chester Wade's office that afternoon expecting to divide everything before I was even cold. What they didn't expect was me sitting in the chair by the window when they got there. But to understand why I was smiling that day, you need to go back about 18 months, to a rainy Thursday in April when we buried my wife. Dorothy and I had been married 31 years. We built our life in a small town in East Tennessee, a 4-bedroom house on Canaan Road that I'd bought when the railroad was still hiring and Dorothy was still teaching 2nd grade. Honey-colored hardwood floors she'd refinished herself. A front porch where we'd argued about nothing and talked about everything. 3 kids raised at that kitchen table. I stood at Dorothy's grave and felt like the ground had swallowed something essential in me. The service was quiet. Afterward, maybe 40 people came back to the house, and I moved through rooms that smelled like her and tried to remember how to breathe. My oldest son found me by the back door. He's 35 now, sells cars at a dealership that's been one bad quarter away from closing since he bought it. Sharp haircut, good shoes. The kind of man who makes a speech at every gathering. "Dad," he said, low and serious, like he was telling me the weather, "we should probably think about what happens to the house." Dorothy had been in the ground 4 hours. I looked at him. "Just practically speaking," he said, "property in this area has gone up. We don't want to make any rushed decisions, but we also don't want to wait too long." I didn't say anything. I nodded the way you nod when the floor drops out from under you. But something very quiet and very cold settled into me right then, the way a nail sets into good wood. My daughter drifted over a minute later. She's 32, lives 40 minutes away, always has a favor tucked inside every phone call. She looked at me with her eyes full of something she wanted me to think was concern. "Landon's right, Dad. You shouldn't have to manage all of this alone. We can help." Manage all of this, as if the house I'd owned for 28 years was suddenly a problem to be solved. Across the kitchen, my youngest was refilling the coffee pot nobody had asked him to refill, Eli. 28 years old, dropped out of community college when Dorothy's cancer came back. Said he needed to be around, said it just made sense. He works at an auto shop in town. His siblings call him the grease monkey when they think I can't hear. They say it the way people say things they've said so many times they've forgotten it's unkind. I watched him wipe down the counter. Dorothy had wiped down 10,000 times. I watched my older two watch the room like they were calculating how much everything in it was worth. That was the day I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Once you start looking, the patterns are hard to unsee. My oldest called whenever the dealership had a problem. "Just a short bridge loan, Dad. Just a co-signature, Dad. Just temporary." I wrote the checks. He forgot to call for weeks after each one. My daughter called on Sundays, short calls, mostly about herself. She'd work up to the request like you work up to a cold swimming hole. "Could I watch the kids this weekend? Could I help with the deposit on a new car? Could I put in a word with someone I knew?" Eli called on Tuesdays to ask if I needed anything from the hardware store. He started showing up for my cardiology appointments 4 months after Dorothy died. Didn't make a production of it. Just texted one morning, "Your appointment's at 10, I'll pick you up at 9:15. Sat in the waiting room with a paperback. Never once looked impatient. Drove me home, helped me figure out which pills were which, made sure I understood what the doctor had said. When the heating unit went out that first winter, my oldest promised to send someone. Nobody came for 3 weeks. Eli showed up with 2 space heaters and a friend who knew HVAC and spent a Saturday getting the whole thing sorted out. "You don't have to do all this," I told him one evening. We were eating at the kitchen table, just the 2 of us. He looked at me like I'd said something strange. "You're my dad," he said. That was the whole answer. I started writing things down in a composition notebook I kept in my workshop. Not out of spite. I wrote things down because I needed to see them clearly, without the fog of wanting to believe the best about people I loved. The loans that were never mentioned again, the visits that didn't come, the Sunday calls that stopped when there was nothing to ask for. Then the morning that settled it for me. I came home from the grocery store in early October, and there was a truck in my driveway I didn't recognize. A man in a vest was walking the perimeter of my yard with a clipboard, and my oldest was beside him pointing at the property line like he owned it. He didn't hear me pull up. The lot runs back to that fence line there, he was saying. Corner lot has good visibility if someone wanted to subdivide. I sat in my truck at the end of the drive. I watched my son show a property assessor around the yard of a house I was still living in. When he finally noticed me, he didn't even flinch. Dad, hey, just getting some comparable numbers for planning purposes. Planning purposes. I pulled the truck into the garage and sat there for a while with the engine ticking as it cooled. I thought about a lawyer named Chester Wade who'd handled Dorothy's estate. Careful man, thorough, the kind who reads every clause twice. I found his number that evening. Before I could get to his office, my daughter made her move. She called on a Thursday, not Sunday, which told me something, and said she needed to talk to me about Eli, in person. She came over that Saturday. Eli was there, fixing the latch on the back gate, hands dirty, not making a thing of it. She didn't waste time. Dad, I'm going to say something you're not going to want to hear. Go ahead, I said. Ellie is taking advantage of you. She sat across from me at Dorothy's table. I see how much time he spends here, we all do. He's positioning himself. Eli came in through the back door. He'd heard her. He stood in the doorway with grease on his hands and looked at his sister the way you look at someone you've already forgiven for something they haven't done yet. I'm right here, Stacy, he said. Good. She didn't blink. Then you can hear me say it to your face. You've been working, Dad, playing the devoted son routine, and some of us see it. The room went quiet in a bad way. I drove Mom to chemo, Eli said, quiet. Where were you? Don't. Her voice sharpened. Don't make this about that. I let it go long enough to see it clearly. Then I said, Stacy, that's enough. Just those 3 words. She pressed her lips together, picked up her purse, told me I'd understand someday. Eli waited until she'd gone, then sat down across from me and let out a long breath. I'm not after anything, Dad, he said. I know, I said. I know exactly what you're after. I met with Chester Wade on a Tuesday in November, drove myself. Sat in his office above the old pharmacy on Main and told him everything. The loans, the assessor, the Saturday confrontation, the notebook I'd been keeping for 7 months. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his pen. You understand this may not be well received, he said. I figured. Then let's do it properly. He leaned forward. 2 independent witnesses, documentation dated and notarized, no gaps they can argue through. Whatever it takes. He studied me for a moment. I also want to suggest one more thing. While we're doing this, let's get your physician to put something in writing. A competency evaluation, dated the same day you sign. If anyone ever argues you weren't in your right mind, we close that door before it opens. I said yes without fully understanding how much I'd need it later. The triple bypass came in February. I'd known it was coming. My cardiologist had been warning me for 2 years that my father's heart and my habits were a bad combination. I went in on a Monday, came out Thursday. Eli slept in the hospital waiting room the first night. He was there every morning when I opened my eyes, brought me the newspaper, argued with me about the crossword, made sure the nurses knew my preferences and my allergies. My oldest came once, stayed 40 minutes, got a parking ticket, complained about the parking ticket. My daughter came with her kids. The kids were loud, she was distracted. She kissed my forehead and left before dinner. While I was still recovering in the hospital, I had Chester come to see me. I dictated a letter in my own words, written out by hand on yellow legal paper, and asked him to keep it sealed until I said otherwise. By June, I was back on the front porch with a cup of coffee and something close to feeling like myself. The will had been signed, the letter was sealed, the competency evaluation was on file in Chester's office. But there was one more thing I wanted. I wanted to be in the room when it happened. Chester raised an eyebrow when I told him. You want to attend your own will presentation, he said. I want to see their faces when they hear it, I said. I'm 60 years old and I nearly died in February. I think I've earned the right to see the end of a story I worked hard to write. Chester almost smiled. I'll arrange it. I told my oldest and my daughter that Chester had requested a family meeting about the estate, documents that needed review, decisions about accounts. Routine, I said. Just come. I didn't tell Eli what was happening. I wanted him to hear it clean, without any time to prepare. They came on a Wednesday morning in July. My oldest in a blazer, his wife beside him in black that looked more like cocktail attire than a weekday meeting. My daughter arrived with a leather portfolio under her arm. I learned later, it held statements she'd been collecting from neighbors about my supposed confusion after surgery, a file she was building for a day she expected to need it. They took the chairs in front of Chester's desk, like they'd reserved them. I was in the small anteroom off the hallway. Eli came last, a few minutes late, in his work clothes, came straight from the shop. He took the chair farthest from the desk near the door, the way he always takes the leftover seat without complaint. Chester settled in behind his desk. I heard him clear his throat. "I appreciate you all coming," he said. "Before we begin, I should let you know there's someone else joining us today." And I walked in. The silence was something I'll keep for the rest of my life. My oldest went still the way a person goes still when the ground shifts. My daughter's portfolio slid half off her lap. Eli looked at me from across the room with his mouth slightly open, not understanding yet. I sat down beside Chester's desk. I looked at all of them. "I thought I should be here for this one," I said. Chester opened the folder and read in a steady, even voice. "To my oldest and to my daughter, I left $10,000 each and a letter. The house on Canaan Road, the retirement savings Dorothy and I had built over 31 years. The land, the accounts, all of it, I left to my youngest son." My oldest made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. There has to be a mistake." "There's no mistake," Chester said, without moving. My daughter set the portfolio flat on her lap. Her face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not anger, not grief, but something closer to a building settling after the foundation cracks. In the chair by the door, my youngest had both hands pressed against his knees. He was looking at me with wet eyes, doing that thing he does when he doesn't want to cry in front of people. Jaw tight, gaze just past my shoulder. Chester picked up the sealed envelope and broke it open. "To my children, if you're all in this room, you know what I decided. I'll tell you why, plainly, the way I couldn't manage out loud. When your mother was sick, one of you drove her to treatment. One of you slept in the chair beside her bed when the nights ran long. The other two sent flowers when it was convenient. When I needed surgery, one of you sat in a hospital waiting room all night on a plastic chair because he didn't want me to wake up alone. The others visited when they could fit it in. I'm not writing this to punish anyone. You'll each receive what a father owes his children. The rest goes to the one who showed up, not when there was something to gain, but every ordinary Tuesday when there was nothing in it but the work itself. Eli, I watched you for 18 months. You never once asked me what any of this was worth. I know what that means. I hope you do too. Landon, Stacy, I love you. I always will. But love and inheritance are not the same thing. Real devotion doesn't wait for a reason. I hope someday you see the difference, and I hope it changes how you treat the people around you who are quietly doing everything." Chester folded the letter. The room held its breath. My oldest stood up. His voice cracked when he spoke. "He wasn't in his right mind," he said. "After the surgery, he was on medication. He's been manipulated." He looked at Eli. "You did this." Chester opened a second folder and laid 2 documents on the desk, face up, turned toward the room. "This is a letter from your father's physician," he said, tapping the first page. "Dated the same day he signed his will. It certifies his competency, his lucidity, and his sound judgment. In medical terms, for exactly this purpose." He tapped the second. "This is the will itself, signed by 2 independent witnesses with no financial interest in the estate. Your father arranged all of this before his surgery. Not after, not in confusion. He planned it over 4 months, with full documentation, and I advised him every step." Chester looked at my oldest, then my daughter. "You're welcome to contest it," he said. "I tell you now what every attorney you call will tell you. You would lose publicly, and it would cost far more than $10,000 to find that out." My oldest sat down slowly. For the first time since he was a boy, he had nothing to say. My daughter looked down at her portfolio, then she slid it quietly under her chair. I looked at Eli. He was still watching me. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "Yes, I did," I said. "Yes, I did." The fallout was swift, the way it is in small towns where everyone already knows the shape of the story before it finishes. My oldest lost the dealership that fall. He'd been counting on leveraging the house I hadn't given him. When that door closed, the bank called his credit line. The lot was auctioned in November. He didn't call me for a long time after. My daughter hired her own attorney to review everything. got the same answer Chester had given her, and let it go. The leather portfolio with the neighbor statements stayed in her car. She never used it. Eli moved into the house on Canaan Road in September, when the leaves on the ridge turned copper and gold the way they do every year, whether anyone's watching or not. He didn't change much. Dorothy's window boxes stayed. The porch stayed. The kitchen table stayed, where it had been for 28 years. 4 scratches on the corner from 30 years of family dinners. He did one new thing. He turned the vacant lot beside the house, the one my oldest had once suggested subdividing for profit, into a community vegetable garden. Raised beds, a tool shed, a hand-painted sign at the gate. Retired folks from the neighborhood started coming on Saturday mornings. Eli started teaching Dorothy's pea and tomato varieties to whoever wanted to learn. He named it after his mother. The Dorothy Holloway Garden. Nothing fancy, just her name on a board and a place where things grew. I sit on the front porch, most mornings now, with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood the way Dorothy always said I should slow down enough to do. Sometimes Eli comes out before his shift and sits with me. We don't always talk, we don't have to. My oldest called last spring. He'd found steady work as a project manager for a firm over in Knoxville. He sounded different. Not softer exactly, but less like a man bracing for the next angle to work. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing much. It was the best conversation we'd had in years. I don't know what comes next between us, but I know which direction it's pointing. My daughter came to the house last fall. She stood at the gate and looked at the sign with her mother's name, and she cried. Eli opened the gate and let her in. They sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I don't know everything that was said, but she's been back since, and the leather portfolio isn't with her when she comes. People have asked me if I felt guilty about what I did, whether it was cruel, whether a father has any right to put conditions on what he leaves behind. Here's what I know. I didn't punish anyone. I told the truth using the only voice that would have mattered, the one that speaks after all the noise dies down. I gave my older children what a father owes. I gave the rest to the one who earned it the way real things get earned. Not with words or promises, but by showing up on the days when nobody was watching and nothing was on the line. Some of you watching right now are the Eli in your family. The one who does the quiet work and gets called the disappointment. The one they joke about at the birthday party and overlook at the dinner table. I want you to hear this from a 60-year-old man who spent a year watching his own family show him who they were. The people who matter see you. They see you every time. Keep showing up. The truth is patient. It always finds a way to speak.